Many people ask me, how did the shift get started? What is it? Why is it? And who are you anyway? In this podcast, I answer those questions and share stories you might never have heard. Why? Because instead of keeping things to myself, I decided that sharing them would make a difference. I hope it does so for you. So come with me as we travel together on the Shift Shuttle and we shift the story together. We are going to spend the best part of the next hour talking about truth. Our focus today is the quote, "Rise in the strength of spirit to resist all that is unlike good." I have always loved this phrase spoken by Mary Baker Eddy. In times of trouble, I take comfort in the image of rising above whatever is bothering me or frightening me. I also love the symbol of a bird flying to the light, hidden by that light from all that would want to harm it. If you have ever watched a bird flying into the sun, you know exactly what I mean. That's the picture the first part of the phrase provides for me. The second part of the phrase asks for something more. It asks us to resist what is not good. That reminds me of the quote from St. Augustine. "Do you wish to rise? Begin by descending. You plan a tower that would pierce the clouds. Lay first the foundation of humility." In this case, I am thinking that he meant to not base what we know on what we think is true, but what is true. Of course, this would lead to a strength that could easily rise and resist what is not good, don't you think? That's what the shift is for me. It's a shift from what we think is true to what is true, and the willingness to become who we are, and doing that by clearing out perceptions of untruth, which reveals truth, which is only good. I'm often asked, what happened in your life that led you to teach the shift? And let me give you the short answer to that question. All my life, I have wanted answers to the big questions, like who or what is God? How can we be good people when the world isn't? What is reality? You know, simple things like that. Even as a kid, I was asking these questions. Actually, until just a few years ago, I thought everybody wondered about these very things. Then I mentioned it to a few friends, and they all started laughing at me. What a surprise to me. But like everyone else, as I grew up, I had a life to live, kids to raise, multiple relationships in and out of my life, money to earn. So these important questions took a back seat to what I thought had to be done just to survive. But I could never get settled at anything I did. One day, after a financial planning client turned down my carefully crafted financial plan in favor of a scam artist's idea, I realized that nothing would ever be better for anyone until they were able to shift their perception of their life to one that could and would include other possibilities for themselves. That awareness, combined with the noticing that no matter what I did to improve myself, and I did a lot, some problems continued to plague me. It was as if they cycled around and returned in a new and improved version. I realized that I too needed to change my perception, as obviously continuing to work on my issues was getting me nowhere. In a flash, it became clear to me that what I wanted to be able to do, because I couldn't stop myself from doing it even when I tried, was shift people's perceptions about what is real and what is reality, which meant it was time to stop identifying with limited ideas and instead see each person, place, and thing as it is in reality, unlimited. I realized that without doubt there is one law that always works, no matter what the circumstances. What you perceive as reality magnifies. It was obvious to me that since this law governs our lives absolutely, Why not choose the biggest, unlimited reality imaginable? That of God as one and omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, unconditional love. I say all of this as if it happened overnight, but it was years in the making, and I practiced every day as I learned to give up my own small perceptions and accept that I am a witness in the action of Spirit, as is everyone. That's a short answer. Let me spend a bit more time exploring a longer version of what is the shift, because it will help us in the idea of rising. Why the shift shuttle? When I lived in downtown LA, I took a super shuttle to the airport. As I prepared to go on the shuttle, I would have what I called super shuttle revelations. Having cleared my desk, my house, and my thinking for the trip, I would stand in the lobby waiting for the shuttle with a clear and open mind. Ideas and awarenesses that had probably been hanging out in the clutter of it all for a while would suddenly be there for me to notice. On one such trip, I had a revelation about my relationships. For the past year, I had had 2 male friendships. I knew neither one of them was the one, and they were both platonic relationships in my mind. But I realized as I stood there that it was not platonic in theirs. I also realized that I had allowed this misconception to be created and continued by some very subtle things that I was doing. It wasn't that I was leading them on. It was that I didn't care enough about myself to set clearer boundaries. It was easy for me to separate myself from feelings, so doing what I suddenly realized was improper behavior was easy for me to do without any feelings about it at all. It was something I had learned how to do years before. Shut off all feelings about how men behaved. It wasn't as if I suddenly got feelings about it myself. It was that I realized that although it meant nothing to me at the time, now it does, I wondered how the one I might meet someday would perceive what I was doing. I imagined how I would feel if I met someone doing what I was doing with my so-called platonic friendships. I wondered if I would be happy about it and think twice before I got involved with them. When I realized that I would not be happy and would in some ways perceive it as a betrayal, even though I didn't know him at the time, I decided to tell both the boys about my decision to stop any behavior, no matter how small, that gave them the wrong impression when I returned home from the trip. However, it was on this trip that I did meet the one. It never was necessary for me to actually say those words to my friends, because when I returned home, they both knew that the relationship, as it was with them, had been completed. But it is important to notice that I had to have the awareness within myself about the behavior and completely repent, shift my thinking of that behavior before I could move to a real relationship. The 2 most important points of all of this is, 1, it happened within me, and 2, I was willing to take the outside action to correct what was happening. It was only then that the outside world shifted to match my current point of view. This is the idea behind the shift shuttle. This is the time we will clear everything off our desks and stand listening in the silence. So what is the shift? What the heck is it? What's the basis of it? Is it an elusive conception or practical? Is it possible to put spiritual reality into words without making it into a use God scam or scheme? All spirituality is revealed by symbols, so let's use words and ideas as symbols to reveal to ourselves the truth. In the shift, we don't start with the point of view that there is something to fix, that you and I are flawed humans. We start from the radical point of view that we are not human at all, but instead we are the unique expression of the one mind knowing itself. We accept and become aware of the truth, that all that is going on is divine love, loving itself, supplying itself, seeing only itself in action. So easily said, and even once in a while the understanding of this truth is easy too. Most of the time, though, you and I live as if we are separate, within our own labels, like woman, man, mother, and child. Then we add more labels like race, age, and intelligence. Each label carries with it a multitude of blinders, keeping us from seeing that we are all one mind loving itself. Or, as Mary Baker Eddy said, the compound ideas of mind. I love those words. I love the promise. I love the awareness that this is true. But I do not always either live them or truly understand them, because I most often still act as if I am human. The good news, though, is that it doesn't matter how much we think we are human or how many good or bad things we humanly do, we are never changing truth. It would be like a bunch of numbers, like, say, the number 3 living and acting like it was the number 4. It might convince itself that it was really the number 4, and might spend its whole life living like it, acting like it, making decisions as if it was a 4. But nothing that it did would ever change the truth that it is really the number 3. That is exactly what we are like. Number 3s, thinking we are number 4s. Now, the minute that number 3 really remembered and totally saw that it was a 3, its whole world would shift in that instant, wouldn't it? And even if he forgot again in an instant and clung to the habit of 4, something changed in what appeared as his world. For that moment, the mist cleared, and big our reality was seen. The longer he remembered and truly acted as if he was a 3, the longer his awareness of the truth of all of who he was would remain. The longer what looked like his world would shift to more and more clarity as a 3. Let me tell you a personal story about this. One of my daughters was delivering her first child. We were all in the hospital waiting for this delivery. It was taking a long time, and she was really struggling. This is the daughter that I had delivered with almost no pain. I had prepared for months studying the truth of being. I had completely understood that this was not a me delivering another me with all the attached curse of woman, always being in labor. That's another story, isn't it? We'll come back to it another time. Suffice it to say that I had stepped out of the labels for that moment and saw that I was only seeing another unique idea of God appearing. I had gone to the hospital and said, "I am in labor." They said, "Are you in pain?" I said, "No." And they said, "Well, then you can't be." Belief systems run deep. I said, "You better look for yourself." And of course, when they did, they discovered it to be true. So you see, for a moment, I remembered I was a 3, and so was she. But while I was waiting in the hospital for her to deliver her own child, I wasn't thinking that at all. I was thinking mother, child, mother, child, mother, child. I was in 4s all the way around. Until I heard the doctors in the room with her say, "We better go get Dr. X, because I think we're going to have to do a cesarean." What am I thinking? I said to myself. And I immediately went into shift mode. As they went to get him, I really shifted my thinking. I began to remember that there is only one mind knowing itself, that what I was seeing wasn't happening. None of what I was experiencing was true, except for the love I felt, because love is all that was filling the entire hospital. Within minutes, the doctor entered the room. I heard him say, "No, we can just deliver this baby." And moments later, I heard my granddaughter cry. For a minute, the mist parted, and the truth shone through, and it appeared to me and everyone else as a perfectly practical event. The truth is, there is only one universe, and it is spiritual, and there is nowhere to go but to be. But in what we call the earth state of mind, there appears to be paths we must walk. In time, we will learn there is no path. We are already there. In time, we will not only say there is only one IRS, but we will fully understand what that means. In the meantime, it appears as if we walk a path to get to truth. Most people in the earth state of mind walk the material path. On this path, the earth, the universe, and everything we are and do, we believe to be material. In the material world, physical power reigns. The shift is all about perception and how to shift that perception from the small R reality, the earth state of mind, to the big R reality, where everything is spiritual. We don't practice the shift to make something happen, but to see what is. Some of us have upgraded to the mental path of believing it is a mental world, and everything is within and of our own thinking. We use mind power to accomplish our goals and live a better life. In this point of view, the mind-body connection comes into play. We begin to say, I can do it. We say to ourselves, all I have to do is visualize enough and get my mind and thinking straight. Mind power employs methods such as visualization and hypnotism to accomplish its goals, but remains in the earth state of mind. This mental path will sometimes diverge into another path, the path of mysticism. The world today is fascinated by this mental, mystical power and is calling it the spiritual revolution. Talk about God is accepted and is now found in all walks of life. It is an improved point of view of the physical standpoint, but it is not the path we are talking about in the shift. There is one more path, and it is the path of one mind, that path of non-power, the true spiritual path. This is the shift to being completely conscious that all that we are and know and see is in truth spiritual. This is living in grace. Of course, it is hard to talk about spirituality and explain how it is practical at the same time. I have to use physical words and mental exercises to make a point. Sometimes I talk about getting things or improving your life. But getting things, improving one's life is a result of the awakening consciousness that this is a spiritual universe, not because we are creating it ourselves or trying to make it happen. Getting things and improving life is not the point. An improved life is the fruit of the awareness of and the living out of the truth that there is only one of everything. And that one is spirit. It is the choice to shift to spiritual perception. We have nowhere to go and nothing to search for within truth we are already here in heaven, in spiritual perfection, in grace. It may look as if we're walking a path together, evolving together, and supporting each other in our search for truth. But in truth, we are already one, and we have never left the reality of heaven. The shift is the yielding, the letting go of, or relinquishing any point of view that claims we are separate, alone, and material, or even mental. We must leave the belief in dualism, good and evil, and return to the awareness of one, which is perfection. The shift to spiritual perception explains the power of perception. It is our point of view, our perception, that determines our world and the life we live. As we go through this series, we will cover the 7 keys to grace and the 8 step-by-step system based on the word gracious, which makes the process of perception shifting easy to remember and simple to use. But first, let me give you a longer view of how the shift came to be and what I learned, because I think it will help you too. I started teaching the shift as a complete idea in the early 90s, but I have been telling people my whole life that there is a different way to see the world. I come from a family of readers, so as a child and young adult, I read everything I could get my hands on. I collected quotes, articles, and books, all marked up with what I saw as supporting evidence. In fact, when I met my husband Dell and he started reading my books, he was amazed and amused, find that he had to read through books that had so many paper clips in them that it was like carrying metal books. This was before the times of those stick-on tabs that both he and I use now. I went to churches and retreats and centers of all kinds. I was looking for the common denominator. I was seeking to understand universal principles while looking for what didn't fit and had only been added to make a form of a religion. I was a seeker and continue to be a seeker of truth. I knew somewhere inside of me that someday I would have to share all the information and insight I was gathering, but I truly didn't want to. There were many reasons why. Some I am still dissolving for myself, so I didn't. Instead, I did many, many different jobs, some good, some really bad, bouncing around from work to work, but always thinking about the shift. The inner voice to share this information got bothersome, but I ignored it the best I could. As I have been doing for many years, I was running a small mastermind group. It was in this group that I often stuck my toe in the water and taught, seriously, the word taught in quotes, the shift concepts, and hoped that would quiet that voice down. What I told myself I wanted to do was just to live a private life as a writer. I had written my first published book, A Woman's ABCs of Life, but wasn't making any money on it, so I decided it was practical to find a job. I was well qualified to do almost anything, but couldn't find a job. No one would hire me for anything. I knew I was thinking too small, but I didn't want to think bigger. Responsibility and loss of freedom were two of the beliefs that I had and reasons I told myself no. One day I was sitting in my apartment in Los Angeles and I heard that voice say, "Start painting again." I was thinking the voice meant start painting again as an artist, and that made no sense to me, so I ignored it. It bugged me over and over. Once again, I had reasons why I didn't want to. I even had made myself so poor I thought I couldn't afford to buy the paint. But the voice wouldn't let me alone. Finally, I decided if I couldn't afford real paint, I could afford a can or two of wall paint. So off I went to the store and came back with 2 colors and painted a wall mural in my living room. That was not new to me. I used to do it everywhere we lived, often to my children's dismay. Oh God, there goes Mom painting on the walls again. I even painted a red piano. Not me. I didn't paint it red. It came that way with some of my designs. I had even made money painting other people's walls. See, another job I used to do. Anyway, to continue the shift story, that small amount of painting amazingly stopped the voice telling me to paint. Phew, relief. But in just a day or two, it was back telling me to return to financial planning to support doing what I was supposed to do next, teach the shift. I wasn't calling it the shift at that time, but I still knew what it meant. No, I said, I don't want to either thing. No to what I perceived as returning to corporate America as a CFP. That is an entirely different story, but suffice it to say, using shift ideas, that was not how it was at all, and certainly no to teaching the shift. But once I had opened up the door to actually following that voice, doing something I didn't think I had a right to do, paint my walls, it was easier to listen to and follow the voice again. This is a key point. That minor thing of painting my walls helped remind me of who I was. It stopped part of my hiding and not trusting. It made me feel great. I had allowed myself to do something I wanted to do. I didn't have to wait for enough money or worry that I was not a talented artist. All those small, tiny, hidden thoughts that keep us in prison were opened up a bit for me, and that was the beginning of the end to my resisting sharing my obsession with perception shifting. Which brings me back to the mastermind group. I told them what was happening, and I said to them, "Who would want to hear this stuff anyway?" They said, "We will." So back home I went and wrote the first version of the shift class and taught those first few people in my newly beautiful living room for 1 hour a week for 8 weeks. Then one of them said, "How about a one-day shift? Perhaps people would be willing to at least try shifting for a day." Why not, I thought. I called it a shiftathon, which is exactly what it was, and I did that for a few years. I have no idea how I got all the shift into one day, especially since I spent more than an hour of the day justifying why what I was going to reveal might actually be true because other people, other than me, of course, said so. With all that information packed into one day, no wonder people walked away saying, "Wow, what was that?" Now that one day or 8 hours has grown into books, e-zines, home study courses, teleclasses, sermons, discussion, masterminds of all levels, blogs, retreats, gatherings, you name it. In some way, I have put these same principal ideas into many forms with the hope that anyone who wants it can have access to it. In fact, at one point, I had one of those groups of people, the group that had continued past the one-day shiftathon into an ongoing series called Shift Masters, learn a dance called the 5-step shift. This was before I met Del, and we expanded to 7 steps because of what he brought to the shift. I thought it would be fun to bring my choreography skills to the shift. One woman in that group reminded me recently that it was not fun for her at all. That idea didn't last, but it was a dance for a minute. It is not that I'm bringing something new to the world. I am not. The shift is a way of revealing the universal principles that have already been known and taught by many master teachers. What I have seen is something entirely logical at first, and then proven next, and easy to understand. That is, that what we perceive to be reality magnifies. That no amount of saying something will make it true for you or me. It has to be re-perceived and then lived. At the time, all my friends and I were seminar junkies. We had tried everything. But when I looked at our lives, I realized that every one of us had not really dissolved anything. We were all still struggling with beliefs that kept circling around back into our lives. Sometimes into a higher form of the problem, but it was always there again. The shift grew out of the need to stop that cycle and eliminate forever the belief and the reasons for that belief. We all have to shift to the point of view that we are not creators for the good or bad. We are creation itself. We all have to step outside of the prison of thinking we are human in order to be free. What keeps us from knowing who we really are? It's a missed perception, a missed perception. Where did that missed perception come from? That question in itself comes from a perception that distracts us from the work of shifting to truth. It is an intellectual exercise that leads to nowhere. Once we stand and live in truth, there is no one to ask that question, because one mind knows only itself as all there is. Divine intelligent love is all that is present. It knows nothing of our missed perception. It's like returning to a river, stepping into its soothing waters. Nothing changed the river while we were away, and all that it takes for us to be soothed again is a return to it. Stepping back into it, we once again experience its grace. That's a brief history of the birth of the shift, except for that it used to be called the power of perception. Then one day, driving into the parking garage, I heard that voice again say, "Call your company the shift." And then everyone started calling the class the shift, so we changed the company to the Shift Center. But the key to the shift is always perception. So the place to start is, perception. Of course you hear me talk about perception and the 2 modes of perception all the time. But it is always useful to talk about it again, because really, that's the only thing we have to do, shift our perception. Perception can be divided into 2 modes, point of view, and state of mind. The natural outcome of learning perception is the clear understanding of why the law, what we perceive to be reality magnifies, works. Everyone knows, well, almost everyone, that there is only perception. I remember trying to explain to people what the shift was. I knew it was a good idea to have an elevator speech, to be able to give people that quick, fast, easy to understand answer when they asked, "What do you do?" But I couldn't come up with anything that made sense for a long time. First, because in the beginning my explanation involved some sort of apology, because I knew that human words were never going to describe spiritual truth. Besides, I was trying to explain it to a wide variety of people, from the guy I got my rental videos from, the cafe store in my building, my fellow financial planners. Actually, I tried to stay away from that one as much as possible, to my parents, and even to people I thought would be interested in actually taking the shift class. Mostly, I was afraid of being thought I was crazy or thinking I had no right to be doing what I was doing. In the end, I would simply say that I taught people how to shift their perception, and everyone would nod and say, "Yep, it's all perception. Done. Finish. That's all there is to it." It went along with the answer people gave to me when I asked all kinds of people, "What is God?" "Love, of course," they would say. Done. Finished. That's all there is to it. Actually, that's true. That is all there is to it. God is love, and our perception keeps us from seeing it and living it. We all know the words, but do we know the how? Before we go further into the modes of perception, let's review how we got our limited perception in the first place. We accepted the worldview. We were taught. We learned well. Our perception and acceptance of the worldview closes down all awareness that there is more than our five senses tells us. In fact, we usually agree with the worldview that our five senses tell us the truth, and we forget that they are simply the mirrors of our own perception. Each of us lives within the walls of our own perception, inside the walls of our own personal paradigm or mental prison. Whatever we decide is true, we let in only that information, and that continues to prove our point of view. Any information that might disagree with it is simply filtered out. It's the ultimate computer filter. This is a safety mechanism. It helps us survive. But we were meant to do more than survive. We are the action of infinite love. That is much more than survival. This is why the first step in the shift has to be willing. If we are not willing to let in a possibility that there is more than our own perception and paradigm, well then, there isn't. Haven't we all tried to change someone, fix someone, or drag him or her along with us? I know I have. Oh my gosh, have I ever. I think it is a particularly strong viewpoint of women that they can see potential, and then they decide, or we decide, that we can bring it forth into the world, usually at the expense of our own being who we are. This is actually an inverted truth about the power of womanhood. Again, something we will get back to later. If you have ever tried to make someone willing, you know it can't be done. You can only move yourself to willing. Here's the good news. When we move ourselves to willing, when we go within and become willing, what appears as the outside world moves with us. Why is this? Because everything is us, not because we are the creator, but because there is only one creator, mind, infinite love, and we are that divine love in action. Why don't we always know this? Because we believe in what we perceive, instead of understanding that what we believe is what we perceive. We have a hard time understanding this concept and then living it in a practical manner. Most of us have to work it out in our own thinking. This is where the understanding of the two modes of perception helps. As I mentioned, the first mode is point of view. We all get to choose what point of view we want our lives to be based upon. It sounds easy, and it is, except that we most often miss that we have hidden points of view that are getting in the way of a chosen point of view. I may actually believe that there is only love, for example, and that is my point of view, but I may act and feel as if I am not love, which is my real point of view. The second mode is state of mind. Once again, I may believe God is love and omnipresent abundance. I may fully understand and choose that what that means is God has always and will always meet my every human need. Not only that, I may actually understand and have the point of view that it has been pre-prepared for me. I may believe that, but I act and feel as if there is not enough money to pay the rent, or I may only allow myself enough to survive. Both of these modes of perception hide truth from us. They don't change it. They simply hide it from our view. Even when I want to shift, it can still be hard. I know one of my biggest shifts was actually completing the writing and publishing of my book, Living in Grace. This was a huge shift for me. I always meant to write the book. The shift class was originally intended to be the testing ground for the practicality of the principles, so when I wrote it, I could do it knowing I had done the right thing. Remember, I wanted to be a writer. However, I just couldn't get the book done. I started the book over and over again. I finished it twice, rewrote it, and then would get stuck on the last few things necessary to get it published. Finally, I got a publisher, and he stalled for another 2 years. I could feel myself resisting letting this message go out into the world. Why, I kept asking myself. I had been successful at other things. One day, while visiting my daughter, I heard myself say, because it is so hard to be selling myself, and so much easier to sell someone or something else. This was an instant shift, because in that moment, I went back to our first key to grace and the first step of the shift, be willing and God first. I realized that this book and the message had nothing at all to do with me. I was selling, in quotes, God's work, not mine. What a relief. The fear, the blocks, and who knows what else was keeping me from doing what needed to be done instantly dissolved. Shifts are that fast and permanent when they start from the right premise. I was in California at the time visiting my daughter. As soon as I felt that shift, I called my husband and said, we have some money, and who cares if we don't have it when we're done? But I will care if I don't do this one thing I know we are supposed to do. He agreed, and 2 months later, we had the book published and in the stores, even though we knew nothing about publishing when we started. Another question people ask me is, what are the benefits of making a conscious choice to shift to a different perception? This is a loaded question. It's the $64,000 question, because there is no other way to make a permanent change in one's life. We have to make a conscious choice to shift to a different perception. For me, it seems logical that if you are going to do all that work to make and stay in a different perception, because it is hard work, why choose one that is only slightly better than the one you started with? Why not go the whole way and never have to repeat it again? I believe that eventually we will all have to choose a spiritual perception. So why not start now? Besides, it is the spiritual perception that actually works permanently. Every other point of view, even an improved point of view, is a Band-Aid. And as nice and comforting as Band-Aids are, they don't actually get to the heart of the wound and heal it forever. Why is it so hard to do things like shift our perception when we know it's good for us? What are the things that keep us from allowing ourselves to experience the unlimited wealth and love that is ours? What keeps us from shifting our point of view, our perception, so we can notice them and experience them in our lives? Really, it all boils down to one thing. We think we are separate from God. This belief makes us fear so many things. We succumb to temptations. We hold on to the human ego, and we use human willpower. It's often easier to stay with what we know than to cast off into what appears as uncharted waters and have absolutely no idea what will happen. What's funny about this point of view is we never know what's going to happen. We just think we do. Sometimes it may seem as if it's just too hard to shift our perception. But really, is it? Maybe that's just a perception itself. For example, let's pretend that you and I are attending a conference with a large group of people. We decide to step outside of the room for a minute. While we are gone, someone enters the room and convinces everyone who is still there that they have chicken feathers growing out of their arms. After our little break, we walk back into the room, and everyone rushes up to us and says, "Help! We have a problem. We have chicken feathers growing out of our arms." Would we see chicken feathers? No. Can we heal them of chicken feathers out of their arms? No. The only thing we can do is stand in the truth of who they are and not be hypnotized into believing what they believe. We must stay with the understanding that there are no chicken feathers. If they are willing, they too will no longer see them either. But nothing they did made them grow there. They never have had chicken feathers. They have always had perfect arms. As I mentioned before, there's 7 steps to shift, or 7 steps to grace. And the one that we're talking about the most today is the one, be willing, because nothing happens without willingness. Sometimes we are forced by circumstances to be willing. Other times it is a choice to move towards truth rather than running from bad things. It's easier to choose to move to good, though, isn't it? So you will know where we're going. Just let me give you the 7 steps so you'll have them in your head. The first one, of course, is be willing. The second is become aware. The third is understand signs and symbols. The fourth is learn perception rules. And, of course, we're always talking about the fact that perception rules. The fifth is shift to spiritual perception. Because the first 4 can be used for anything. You can stay on any path you want with the first 4. But sooner or later, we have to shift to a spiritual perception. The 6th one is walk as one, or walk your talk, or watch your words. Make sure they match what you say you believe. And the last one, of course, is always celebrate with gratitude. And it always brings relief. To talk a little bit more about be willing, there's another side of be willing. Not just to be willing to do, but be willing to not do. As I was preparing for this talk, I was overwhelmed with how much I had imposed on myself to do, not just to prepare the talk, but other projects that I felt I had to do, and they had to be done at the exact same time. I felt very responsible for everything. Have you ever felt this way? I think so many of us have accepted huge amounts of responsibility by thinking that we are the only one who can do it, or we worry about not doing what we need to do well, or our responsibility is it has to work. What if it doesn't work? Sometimes we think we are responsible for everything and everybody. There are so many varieties of taking responsibility, aren't there? In the middle of mine, I started getting irritable. It was subtle, but I could feel it, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. And to top it all off, I had to take most of one of these days to get errands done. I didn't want to stop everything because I had so much to do, but I had to run the errands. I was thinking that my job was to get this other stuff done and done well, so why was I stuck with the errands? However, I realized these errands couldn't wait, so I forced myself to step away. And as soon as I did it, ideas started flooding in. I thought of a story I had just heard from a client. He had also been feeling very irritable, and he didn't like that, and he was trying to stop it. He was especially upset because he was irritable with a partner that he had on his job. He knew his partner didn't deserve his being in such a bad mood, but that didn't stop him from feeling that way. He also realized that part of his upset was that he had felt he had to do his partner's work because his partner wasn't capable of doing it well without his help. So he did his own job and then rushed around and did most of his partner's job too. Of course, in his mind, he felt he was doing the right thing and being a good guy, but he was always irritable. Then one day something happened that meant he couldn't jump out of his truck and help his partner with his part of the job. And you know what happened, don't you? His partner did the job completely well, and his irritability vanished. Both people in this story suffered from his feeling that he was responsible, and at the same time he caused his partner to feel incapable. When he did his job, and only his job, it allowed his partner to do his, and both felt great about it. He said that he was amazed that the job went faster than when he was helping. The moral of this story for him and us could be, stay in the truck and do what you alone are capable of doing. Be who you are so that others can be who they are. How does this fit into my awareness of being irritable? I was thinking I had to do God's job along with my own. If I didn't get all the marketing done, the promotion, the writing, then nothing would happen. When I had to step away, I saw my job a bit more clearly. So I said to myself, stay in the truck, Becca, and let God do his own job of knowing itself, which will appear practically in ways you can never make happen no matter how hard you try or how much responsibility you take on. This is the other side of be willing. Be willing to let go. This is taking responsibility for the only thing that really counts, what we are thinking and perceiving. That is absolutely the only place we are responsible. What happens from there is truly in love's hand. All along, we've been talking about rising. We've been talking about rising by doing exactly what the last part of the quote says. Resist all that is unlike God or good. Take a moment every day and consciously remind yourself whom you really are. Remind yourself of the truth of each person you know. See each person, place, and thing as God or good sees the person, place, and situation, and be grateful for its appearance in your life. Take a moment to breathe in the thought, I am one with divine love, and breathe out the thought, I am the action of divine love. Don't wait for the perfect time and place. Do it whenever it occurs to you. Be a witness to the transforming power of this perception, this thinking, how it will transform both yourself and everyone who comes in contact with you. As I mentioned, we have the 7 steps to shift, or the 7 steps to grace, and that's what it takes to shift our perception. But we also have a gracious model that helps us stay in that shift. We'll cover more of these steps in the gracious model later, but in the meantime, let me give you a very brief overview of what they are. The first letter in the word gracious is G, and it stands for God first. This is exactly what we're doing when we say there's only one mind, and all that we're thinking about and perceiving and acting from is the one mind. Put God first. The R in gracious is repent. It's not the repent of, oh my gosh, I should just beat myself up. It's the repent of shifting our thinking and turning around and walking the other way. The next letter is A, angel ideas. All through this talk, I've been talking about the voice. And in many ways, that voice is the angel idea. It's the ideas that come to us that lead us out of the prison of our own thinking and ask us to take action. The next letter is C. This is where we choose consciously, not unconsciously. This is where we consciously choose our point of view. The next letter is I, for imagine. Imagine what if. This is not the same as visualization, which can only happen within the mental framework of the worldview. Imagination takes us into seeing as much as possible how God perceives. The next letter is O. This is obsessive vigilance. There's only one thing to be obsessive about, and that is shifting. Any other obsessions that we have are usually locking us into a point of view, and that locking into a point of view becomes our own personal prison. The next letter is U, which stands for unkink the hose. Once again, this is something we'll cover later, but the hose is always flowing. Abundance of God is always present. It's always our own point of view or state of mind that's hiding it from us. So when we unkink that, the hose flows once again for us. And this last letter is S. So be it. Let it go. Step back. Let God. All of this allows us to rise in the strength of spirit, to resist all that is unlike good. Filling our lives with the true idea of spirit, good, God, is much like filling a balloon with helium. It can't help but rise. It happens as a natural result of remembering who we are. That takes a pause and a listen, which is much like putting the plug into the balloon before we blow it up. Really, it's not work. It's remembering and being willing and choosing our point of view and bringing our state of mind into agreement with it. When we do, it's easy. We rise. Like leaven in a loaf of bread, once a grain of truth is dropped into our lives that have been prepared to accept it, we will rise. Before I close, let me read you true statements using the gracious model that you can say to yourself that will help shift both those modes of perception to truth. They are not positive statements covering up negative emotions. They are statements of what is true now. God first. I will put God first in everything that I say, think, or do. Repent. I will completely shift my point of view and state of mind to truth. Angel ideas. I will listen for and take action on the constant guidance of angel ideas that lead to light, love, and abundance. Choose consciously. I will consciously choose what I want to see in my life. I know it has already been provided for me because I am the expression of the unlimited mind of God. Imagine what if. I will imagine only the feelings of what is beautiful, good, and pure. Obsessive vigilance. I will be obsessive about only one thing, shifting to gracious. Unkink the hose. I will unkink the constantly flowing abundance hose by releasing negative habits and limited belief systems. So be it. I will release it all to God. When I have done my part, and having done all, I will stand still in love. That's our Shift Shuttle for today. Let's rise together. And as the rising tide lifts all boats, we will lift the world into light.